How to design a PractiCAD template using the PractiCAD layer mechanism. PractiCAD allows you to dictate what entities will go to what layer based on any condition set you would like to create in the software. Earlier in other tutorials, we have designed a template or a PractiCAD training template, and we have created 4 different layer types. In this tutorial, we're going to use the ML supply high pressure and the ML supply low pressure. In order to tell PractiCAD when we would put an entity on these layers, we need to go to the layer mechanism. To do that, I'm going to go into PractiCAD Library. It is this icon on the PractiCAD ribbon. When the library is opened up, on the left-hand side, we're going to have a choice under Presets. I'm going to open up by clicking on the little plus key, and I'm going to go to Layers. When I click on Layers, it'll open up the PractiCAD layer mechanism. Here you will notice we've got basic 5 windows. The first window lists all of the entities inside PractiCAD: layout lines, fittings, air devices, and so on. In this tutorial, we're going to choose fittings. The next choice we have here is to do layer by current or layer by name. Basically, this is whether you'd like the PractiCAD layer mechanism activated or non-activated. If you choose current, PractiCAD will just place entities on whatever your current layer is. However, if you would like PractiCAD to put entities on predefined layers based on conditions, we want to choose with name. Now in this box here, what we're going to do is create the conditions for the fittings. We're going to add a new layer by clicking on the green checkbox. And what we want to do is recreate the layer names that are on our template. So first we're going to create an ML supply low pressure. And then we're going to create an underscore ML supply high pressure. Now you must be very careful to make sure that everything is capitalized correctly. This section is case sensitive. You must use the exact name of the layer, uppercase and lowercase, if you'd like PractiCAD to put the entity in the proper place. This is very important virtually everywhere in the software. Once we've created all of the layers and the names that we'd like fittings to go to, we must now create the conditions that dictate why a fitting should go on this layer. To start, we're going to go to the ML supply low pressure. We're going to create 2 conditions that a fitting must meet before it's placed onto this layer. The first condition is going to be the zone. Notice I have clicked on this window here and I've got a drop down dialog box. When I do that, we get a list of every single property in the software. Now we can navigate by pulling down, or we could hit the first letter of the property we'd like to use. In this particular case, I'm going to hit the letter Z, and you can see that it jumps right to zone. Z for zone. This is a quick way of getting to the property that you need. Then over here, another drop-down box is going to open up, and I'm going to say zone equals or doesn't equal, and then I'm going to choose the zone I'd like to use. Now the reason I have these zones here is because inside my workbox I have them created. There are tutorials as to how to design these choices. Each user will be different. These are the zones I'm using, so I'm getting my drop-down menu. I'm going to choose zone equals supply. Then I'm going to add a second condition set by clicking underneath zone and say also S for specification. Scroll down. Not only does the zone need to equal supply, but specification must equal, and I'm going to choose 2-inch water gauge for my low pressure. Once again, these choices will be different dependent upon the user. Now we have a choice here to check or uncheck these boxes. The difference between checking them and unchecking them is in the logic. PractiCAD is spelling the logic of your conditions here. And there is another section outside of this tutorial that explains this in more depth. Most of the time, these boxes are checked. Notice that when the box is unchecked, it says zone should be undefined or should be equal to supply. Undefined means that the property has nothing in it. So if a property was blank, it would be considered undefined and therefore might meet the condition set. However, if the box is checked, it says zone should be defined and it should be equal to supply. What this means is the property zone must be defined and must be equal to supply in order for that fitting to go. It basically guarantees that the fitting will be placed on this layer. Once again, go through the tutorials on this to go into more depth. For this, I'm going to keep them both checked. So for the first layer, zone must equal supply, specification must equal 2-inch water gauge. For the next layer we're going to create, very similar, we're going to say Z for zone equals supply, and we're going to say specifications are going to equal our high pressure specifications. Now the only difference here is we're going to say equals 4-inch water gauge or equals 6-inch water gauge. Notice we can create multiple conditions. I'm going to check them both, and then let's read the logic. It says zone should be defined and equal to supply, and specification should be defined and equal to either 4-inch water gauge or 6-inch. So either one of these, the fitting will go to this layer. The last question is what happens if PractiCAD doesn't have a location or it doesn't meet a condition set we have here? Well, then PractiCAD is going to use what we call the default layer. The default layer is what we put in this window here. I am going to put as a default layer _ miscellaneous fittings. What this means is if I grab a fitting and it doesn't meet the conditions here or match up to any layer I've created, it's going to put it on the layer miscellaneous fittings. Now my template currently does not have a miscellaneous fittings layer created. So what's going to happen when I place something that doesn't match these conditions is PractiCAD is actually going to create this layer for us. The same thing would happen as if I didn't have an ML supply high pressure layer on my template. If in fact the fitting matched these conditions, PractiCAD would create this layer for us as well. Once I've designed all of my layers and all of my conditions, I'm going to hit the save key. It's the diskette over here on the left. I'm then going to exit out of the library section. I'm going to come up into my workbox and choose zone supply and specification 2-inch water gauge. And when I go to place a fitting down on the drawing, you can see here by clicking on that fitting that it's going to the ML supply low pressure layer. Now I'm going to change my specification from 2-inch to 4-inch and apply it to new fittings. Then I'm going to grab a fitting and place it on the drawing right next to the low pressure. Here you can see that it's gone to a different layer, the ML supply high pressure. So therefore, the layer mechanism is correct. What happens if I pick something like a return layer, which we haven't already defined? I'll say zone return, apply to new fittings. Now we go to select a fitting and put it on the drawing. And as you know, it doesn't meet any of the conditions that we've created. So PractiCAD has gone and created a default miscellaneous fittings layers for us. That is how to use the PractiCAD layer mechanism. Please review the remaining tutorials in this section for learning to do tags and other entities, catalog items, piping systems, and also some tricks that make it easier to use while drawing.